Welcome to Introduction to Teaching Online. In this video series, we will discuss online learning environments and the differences you'll encounter when teaching in an online setting versus the traditional face-to-face classroom. This is an introductory video series, so we'll cover the basics of teaching online with a hands-on approach of how to address the various challenges you may encounter in online instruction. Please note, this is part 2 of a 3-part video series. If you have not already done so, please pause this video and go back and watch part 1, which covers the online classroom and the needs of the online student. Part 2, which you are currently watching, will cover the 3 components of a successful online course. And part 3 will highlight features in Canvas which can address the challenges of online learning. It is recommended that you watch all parts in this video series to ensure a comprehensive overview of online teaching. By the end of this video, you should be able to successfully describe the components of a successful online course. Let's discuss specifically what you can put into an online course to address student needs and make the course successful. The first component is measurable learning objectives. Much can be said about learning objectives and aligning your objectives with course content, but we only have time to mention them briefly in this session. TLT offers a webinar specifically on learning objectives and the concept of alignment. If you'd like a much more detailed review of this concept, please consider signing up for that webinar via our website. The contact information will be at the end of this video. What we'll cover in this training video are the 2 levels of learning objectives, course level and module level. Course level learning objectives are measurable outcomes which students obtain from the course overall. They are brief, clear, specific measurable goals that describe the learning that should occur by the end of the course. Module level learning objectives are measurable outcomes students will obtain from that particular module's material, and they should tie into and support the course level objectives. You just heard me use the word measurable twice. Let's think about what exactly a measurable learning objective is. Learning objectives should concretely describe what students are to gain from instruction and should avoid vague terminology. Measurable learning objectives also name the criteria instructors will use to assess or measure student accomplishments. To accurately assess your students, learning objectives must be focused and describe an activity you can measure and evaluate mastery of. Objectives should include action verbs, and a great source of concrete measurable action verbs is Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a set of hierarchical models used to classify learning objectives into levels of complexity and specificity. Take a look at this pyramid. Inside the pyramid is the category or type of learning, and the bolded words on the right are examples of action verbs pertaining to that category. The bottom of the pyramid is a lower level learning activity, remembering. A higher level learning activity, such as evaluating or creating, sits at the top of the pyramid. The bolded words describe student activities within that category that can be measured and assessed and therefore make for good learning objectives. Let's look at a few examples of good and bad learning objectives. At the beginning of each video in this series, you are presented with a few objectives. In part 1 of this video series, one of the objectives was explain strategies to address the needs of your online students. You'll notice the objective begins with explain, which is a measurable action verb and falls on Bloom's taxonomy as understanding. If this were a course, the instructor could assess your ability to explain strategies to address the needs of your online students, perhaps asking you to write a paper or give a presentation to explain these needs, and then using that paper or presentation to gauge your ability to do so. The same objective could be written in a way that is not measurable. For example, the objective could have been, understand strategies to address the needs of your online students. The verb understand is not measurable. It is too broad and fails to specify any action students should practice and master. Understanding may be your overall course goal, but should not be a learning objective in and of itself. You can assess whether a student understands something by asking them to explain it, summarize it, interpret it, etc. Those are actions that are measurable. Understanding is not an action and therefore should not be given as a learning objective. There is much more that can be said about learning objectives, including the concept of alignment and how all of this ties into online course evaluation rubrics such as Quality Matters. So please consider attending our session on alignment for more specifics. For now, let's move on to backwards course design. Backward course design involves first focusing on what we want the students to learn to do. It does not begin with what material we want to teach. We start with the end goal, the learning objectives, and then we work backwards. After deciding objectives, we must decide on how we will assess the student's ability to successfully complete those objectives and, finally, determine what we will give students, such as instructional materials and practice activities, so that they can achieve the goals successfully. So, a useful order of operations is to write your measurable learning objectives first, and then design your assessments. Then build remaining course elements around them so you are constantly referring to what exactly you want your students to learn. And each reading, discussion, project, or other class activity centers around what will help achieve your learning objectives. Another way to ensure success in online courses is through chunking. Students work through course material differently in an online class than they would in person. Since online courses are mostly self-paced and fit in around other parts of a student's life, it's wise to present your material in short chunks that can be processed while multitasking. For example, rather than posting a 60-minute video lecture, post 6 10-minute videos where the content is broken into smaller chunks, perhaps with a 2 or 3 question quiz after each to check comprehension. If your students are working through your course in broken up chunks of time, they may accomplish and absorb more if the material is chunked rather than presented as one block. Whereas a student may not even bother beginning to watch a 60-minute lecture because they do not have enough time to do it all at once, they could feel more compelled to watch 1 or 2 10-minute videos. Aside from time management, chunking also makes your content more approachable and digestible. That concludes Part 2 of Introduction to Teaching Online. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of the 3 components to a successful online course. I would suggest continuing to watch Part 3 in this series, which will highlight features in Canvas which can address the challenges of online learning. Thank you for watching this tutorial.